Would you call this in your paper? You write about diagonalism, and I actually ended up looking at more things about diagonalism because that was the first time I had actually heard that term.
Yeah.
Um, you use diagonalism to describe a form of anti-establishment radicalism. I think this is what you're getting at now.
Yep.
Can you really explain what that anti-establishment radicalism is and how it manifests in politics? And how does diagonalism mimic leftist rhetoric while serving fundamentally different political goals? And I think this is the most important part about apparently Klein's book and this idea of diagonalism, because I do see it kind of infecting parts of the area that we live in this leftist media space.
Yeah, totally. Diagonalism is a term that Klein uses. I'm not sure about its prehistory before a book, but that she uses to talk about basically the sort of place that Naomi Wolf, her doppelganger, ended up going when the pandemic started, and she reacted to that in ways that channeled all of her worst instincts. The conspiracism, certainly, at the core of it, and I think in combination with that, she'd already become something of a laughingstock. I think her conspiracism about COVID, which alienated, whatever friends that she had left of center. And I think I think there's also just an interpersonal aspect to the dynamic here that happens in, many such cases, which is that once your old friends won't talk to you anymore, you'll hang out with whoever will still have you, and little by little, humans being what they are, you'll start to be influenced by some of their views, and so in Wolf's case, that's like Steve Bannon, who Wolf, like, over the this time period, just became a fixture on Bannon's podcast, The War Room. And when you're looking at the sort of populism that Wolf and Bannon came to represent, which has this branding that's very like, oh, this isn't ideological, or it's like cross ideological or something like that, then this is what she's thinking about when she uses the term diagonalism. So things that, as you said in your opening monologue, squinted at just the right angle, look like the themes of the left. So, it's anti-war if you're incredibly selective about what wars you're talking about, right? Like Trump, ripping up the Iran deal and assassinating Soleimani and doubling the rate of drone strikes in Yemen. None of that seems to count against him, and certainly don't get these guys started on China. But but they sound anti-war when the context is restricted to Ukraine. They, again, they have this surface hostility to big tech, depending on which big tech you're talking about. And there are even some of the like really nonsensical things they spout have this sense where they sort of feel like distorted echoes of things that a leftist might say. So, for example, one of Naomi Klein's books is called The Shock Doctrine, and it's about how, emergencies are, real or imagined, are used to cram unpopular, neoliberal policies down the throats of the population. And then when you look at Wolf's plandemic stuff, it sounds a bit like that. It sounds like this really stupid version of that, rather than, officials sort of fumbling in the dark, trying to respond to an unprecedented public health crisis in whatever way made sense with the constantly changing information they had. This was this plan to institute this authoritarian social control, which, by the way, nobody who says stuff like this is it's like I really want an update from some of these people now, right? That like, oh yeah, you know how we've all had to have vaccine passports for the last 4 years, that very real thing that's happened.
Yeah.
Whatever. But it's kind of like how the deep state faked Sandy Hook, but they couldn't even get any gun control legislation out of control.
They just did it to do it to just prove a point.
I guess, yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing that she's thinking of when she talks about political diagonalism, or this kind of current being like a collective doppelganger of the left. And before get into where my criticism of the book comes in, I mean, I really think it's worth highlighting that Klein also says some smart things about how the mistakes of the left create an opening for this stuff. That she talks about how oftentimes there's this sort of reactive thing that happens, that when they have touched an issue, now it's like toxic, and we can't talk about it anymore. And so yeah, like there is this very stupid conspiracies about vaccine passports, for example, but there is within that there's this germ of a real issue about tech surveillance, for example, that oftentimes people are very dismissive of, because I think we all know the way that in the era of nonstop online political discourse, I think we know that the way a lot of that works, the rules say that whatever the people who most annoy you are hot and bothered about at any given moment. Yeah, exactly, right. I mean, that's
is this why you think diagonalist movements are able to attract followers who might traditionally align with leftist ideals, like outside of, like, how do you think Steve Bannon and his ilk are able to gain a certain amount of traction in a certain, I would say, I guess, anti-establishment space in the left? We definitely know that there's shows that are maybe a little more Bannon friendly. How do you think that rhetoric is able to capture people that might otherwise kind of espouse lefty ideas?
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly, and I know that when you start listing the stuff off, people are like, well, that's not a leftist, that's actually a right winger. It's like, yeah, okay, but like, I think you're missing my larger point, right? And who counts as a true whatever is not, I think, really the essence of the issue here. But like, you look at how somebody like Jimmy Dore could go from I don't know, like Bernie Sanders is a sellout to Tucker Carlson is making some good points. So the first is sort of framed as a missive from the far left, and then the other sort of doesn't really make sense, with that, right? It's like, oh, Bernie didn't fight hard enough in the right ways for Medicare for all, but Tucker never pretended he supported that. So it's kind of nonsensical on its face, but I think these dynamics are part of the answer to that. That it's that I think that it is the case that part of what's going on here is, if certain kinds of complaints or themes resonate with you, if maybe the people who annoy you the most are mainstream liberals, and you see these people who sort of have very anti-establishment optics, who are opposing those guys, and then the thing that's supposed to be a left alternative isn't really speaking to your concerns in a certain way, then I think that's definitely part of the story. But I will say, and this does bring us into, my critique of Klein, that I think that there are a lot of other ways that that the left doesn't present a appealing alternative. So I think that there's, I mean, like, just to go to kind of the main point of criticism, I think that a lot of leftism, as we know it right now, is this sort of weird cocktail of, old timey socialist politics
Mhm.
and this kind of liberal identitarianism, that is, that's incredibly alienated, that, that in a certain sense is incredibly alienating by design, because the I think that it really caters to this kind of elite taste for self-mortification, for the sort of pride you take from having gone on this kind of moral vision quest to become a better person and an ally and all of that stuff. And and I think that's I think that ultimately, if we are in a situation where not only sort of the libs,
Mhm.
but also people who are supposed to be a left alternative to the libs are ultimately telling people, oh, you are innately part of this oppressor category, that at best you can undergo this like kind of moral reformation and become a good ally, always listening, always learning, always worrying that your privilege will be peeking through and distorting your judgments. Then I think that's not a very appealing message. And then when somebody like Steve Bannon comes along and says you're a hardworking, salt of the earth American, who's being screwed over by the globalists, like, that second one is much more appealing.